You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie from the US.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two women who never met in real life, but who still managed to build not only this podcast, but also a real-life friendship. I think Annie is one of the 5 people who I'm in daily contact with.
Yeah, same. We might be the first person to realize that the other person has been kidnapped. So...
Seriously, yeah.
Right?
It's crazy, right?
We're back. We hope you had good holidays.
We're back.
Or at least ones that didn't require any police involvement or exploding toys. We're very happy to be back in your ear holes with some brand new episodes, and we're ready to get back to strange, unsettling stories from history. Before we get started, we want to say thank you to our Patreon patrons. Truly, we appreciate you all so much. And we want to especially thank our newest patrons, and they are Lab Lizzie.
Oh, she's a rejoiner, a reoccur. Is that recurring?
Yes. Welcome back, Lizzie. Hi.
Hey.
Skip Clover, Carol Lavanda, Laura Capitano, and Cassandra Cons. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your support is what allows this show to exist in the way it does. You keep the lights on, the editing happening, and the archive tabs open, and we do not take that for granted. We really appreciate you. If you're listening and thinking about joining us on Patreon, you'll find bonus episodes, Cinema Macabre, early access, and a genuinely kind and curious community of people who appreciate the macabre stories without losing their humanity. And you would be very welcome to join us.
You also find, for example, what I saw in our Patreon group chat today? Baby bunny photos.
Oh, those bunnies are so cute.
Did you see them?
I did see them. So, yeah, if you would like some more information, please listen until the end, because now it's time for another fascinating story from Vienna. Johanna, what do you have for us today?
Well, fascinating, yeah, but also horrible.
Yeah.
This is a horrible story. And I have one quick content note before we start. This episode is about a historical case of child abuse and child sexual abuse. And I'm gonna try to handle it as carefully as possible and without all the graphic details, of course. But I just want you to know that before going in. This all takes place in Vienna in the 1920s, so the First World War has ended, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is gone, like completely, and there is a reason why many people outside of the city have started calling Vienna the Wasserkopf, hydrocephalus, so the oversized head sitting on a body that was suddenly far too small to support it. In the late 19th century, so during the Gründerzeit, Vienna experienced a massive population boom. By 1910, the city had more than 2 million inhabitants and ranked among the largest cities in the world. And people at the time genuinely believed that this was just the beginning. There were projections made, and they assumed that Vienna would soon grow to 3 or even 4 million people. We don't have that many people nowadays. Like, we're just hovering around the 2 million still. Anyway, so because they thought the city's gonna grow, they planned accordingly. There were major infrastructure projects, and this was a preparation for a much larger imperial future. This was a capital city built for an empire that expected to last. And then, bummer, the empire didn't. Because the First World War and the collapse of the Habsburg monarchy ended all those plans almost overnight. And Vienna went from being the center of this big, multi-ethnic empire to the capital of a very small, landlocked republic that suddenly didn't quite know what to do with it. The city lost around 200,000 inhabitants in the immediate aftermath. Civil servants returned to their newly independent home countries, refugees moved on, others simply left in search for work or food. But even diminished, Vienna was still disproportionately large compared to the rest of Austria. And I don't just mean in regards of population. Vienna had also inherited the bloated administrative apparatus of the former monarchy, the ministries, the office, bureaucracies, and it was all now concentrated in a city that no longer had this big empire to run. Meanwhile, much of the empire's industry was also gone, located in what had become Czechoslovakia, for example, or the agricultural heartlands. They were in Hungary. So now the result was a city that was heavy on administration and very light on resources. A city with way too many people, too many offices, too much bureaucracy, sitting on top of that country that struggled to feed and support its people. The food shortages were severe. The problem was the collapse of the agricultural production and also the railway transport during and after the war. Interesting that at that time, and I think that's kind of, if you think about it, just a logic step, right? Vienna was becoming increasingly a social democratic. The surrounding countryside, though, remained firmly conservative and Christian social. The city's population density gave the Social Democrats a disproportionate influence, even allowing them briefly to dominate Lower Austrian politics. That made Vienna not just economically suspect, but politically threatening to the surrounding area. So by 1921, both Lower Austria and Vienna, so both sides decided to cut their losses, and Vienna and Lower Austria were formally separated, and in 1922 Vienna became its own federal state. It's now one of our 9 federal states. Both parties wanted to secure their power bases, protect their tax revenues, and limit the other side's influence. Financially, the split hurt Lower Austria, though, far more than Vienna. For Vienna, the outcome was a paradoxical. The city suddenly gained full control over its own taxes, which is interesting because that laid the groundwork for what would soon become known as the Red Vienna. And for our American listeners, everywhere else in the world, red means left-wing, socialist, while in America, right, your red party is the conservative one.
Yes.
So just to not confuse, red, when I say red, it's socialist.
Right, more liberal, socialist.
Yeah,
and
the liberal side, yeah, the left-wing.
Got it.
They had very ambitious social housing projects and very big welfare reforms. Although in the early 1920s, none of that was kind of visible, not running properly yet. And people kind of felt that imbalance after the war. Daily life reflects that imbalance. The inflation is brutal, like everywhere else in the Western world, I think, at the time. As I said, food shortages, very common. Housing is overcrowded. The former soldiers are everywhere and they're carrying visible and invisible injuries. Nobody at the time talks really about the post-war stress syndrome. And a lot of families obviously are still mourning their losses and their loved ones. But on the other side, this is still Vienna. The cafes are still open. The people sit there for hours with newspapers and coffee and they talk politics and culture. And they blame everything on this party or the other party. The opera is performing again. The grand buildings along the Ringstrasse are still there. And all of this uncertainty, all of this dreadful feeling of, okay, what's going to happen now, hangs over Vienna in this period. Economically, politically, psychologically, culturally. And I think this is an important backdrop for this case. What's also kind of important to mention is that this is a city that only a few decades earlier became obsessed with the hidden workings of the human mind. Also, Vienna in the 1920s feels oddly fixated on sex, the deviance, the hidden motives. This is the city of Sigmund Freud, and it had already been living with Sigmund Freud's ideas for decades by the time this case unfolds. Freud suggested that beneath the polite society, beneath all these manners, the morality, the self-control, there's something unruly and sexual driving human behavior. That thought was kind of unsettling to polite society, but it was also kind of irresistible. This is also the cultural world of Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, whose name had already become shorthand for an entire category of desire, masochism. And the fact that masochism is named after an Austrian writer tells you a lot about the intellectual climate I think Vienna had at the time. This power, submission, pain, pleasure, everything a little bit in the open, but also a little bit hidden. By the way, homosexuality is still criminalized at that point in time. And female sexuality is barely acknowledged unless it can be framed as kind of an illness, the hysteria, the wandering uterus.
Of course.
Or a moral failure, the bad women, the sex workers, the street walkers, these things.
Yeah.
And children are supposed to be innocent, obedient, untouched, at least in theory. And at the same time, Viennese society is endlessly fascinated by what happens when those boundaries are actually crossed. There is also another cultural reference from this period that needs to be mentioned very carefully though, because it shows how distorted the attitudes towards sexuality, and especially toward children, could be at the time. In 1906, a book titled Josephine Mutzenbacher began circulating widely, and it was presented as a true memoir of a Viennese prostitute, a Viennese sex worker, and it became infamous almost immediately. The book was repeatedly banned and unbanned and just as repeatedly read anyway. It didn't matter. The problem is not that this book was erotic literature, in my opinion. The problem is that it normalizes the sexual abuse of children. Large parts of the text describes abuse beginning in early childhood and treats it as kind of anecdotal, inevitable, even formative, like it's something important for children. There is no sense of harm or no recognition of coercion. There is no acknowledgement of trauma. The abuse of the children is framed as something that simply happens to girls. It's part of growing up in the city and nothing that is harmful to children. It's it has this feeling of some children are just really interested in sex and it's okay.
Oh, yeah.
And it's honestly so disturbing to me.
The pedophile, excuse.
Yeah, exactly. Fun fact, for our Disney fans maybe. The novel is commonly attributed to Felix Salten. He was a well-known journalist and the writer of Bambi, A Life in the Woods.
Oh.
Exactly that. Bambi, yeah.
Wow. Talk about a versatile subject matter.
Well, it's kind of the loss of innocence in both, right?
Oh,
in a way.
I don't know. Okay.
I just have to be very clear here. Nobody actually knows for certain who wrote the book, Josephine Mutzenbacher, because it was published anonymously. And it's just very often attributed to Felix Salten. He never confirmed it. He never denied it. We don't know for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Regardless of who wrote it, that's upsetting, isn't it? It's upsetting to think that anybody would think it was normal, like that level of abuse would be just the norm. And I know it is in places and still is today. There's no question, but it's a hard thing to think about, isn't it? Yeah, it's why we need age of consent and statutory laws.
Yeah.
Oof.
100%. I think that's it for setting the stage. I hope you can all kind of picture it and have a pretty good idea of where we're at in this moment of time.
Yeah.
Edith Kadivec was born Ida Edith Kadivec on 27th of November 1879 in St. Martin, near Bucet in what was then Istria, part of Austria-Hungary, today part of Slovenia. Her father was a railway official. We're going back to this railway. The railway plays a big part in the jobs of these cases that we cover from the Habsburg Empire. Don't you have the feeling?
I think
somehow I always mention railway officials.
Well, I think it's also just that was like one of the, because that's when the railway was expanding everywhere and people were so
big employer.
Yeah, huge employer. Like I was just thinking, my great-grandfather was at this time working railroad. Yeah, he was a railroad engineer. So,
and it was a good job. It was a job that placed families in the I'd say solid middle class.
Yes, my dad talks about that as though it was like it was a big deal to have a family member that was employed by the railroad. I think it was seen as very stable and...
Stable, lots of benefits.
That's right. That's right. I think that it seems like that was similar around the world.
Yeah. Respectable.
Exactly.
Yeah. Back to Edith. From 1885 to 1894, she attended primary school in Unterwaltersdorf, which is in the district of Baden near Vienna, which is very close to where I'm from, actually. Between 1894 and 1898, Edith then studied at the Teacher Training Institute of the Ursulines in Graz, which is a Catholic institution. The nuns, exactly. They prepared the young women for their careers in education. And I think we mentioned it so many times already. This was one of the very few socially acceptable professions open to women at the time. If you didn't want to go into domestic work, that is.
Right.
After completing her training, Kadivez moved to Vienna, where she worked for about a year as a private tutor in a family household. She then went abroad and took a position at the Lycée des Filles de Notre Dame in Paris, again a Catholic girls' school. And according to her own later accounts, she also attended lectures in philosophy at the University of Paris during this period. I guess that's the Sorbonne. I don't know if this was a formal enrollment or just kind of an informal attendance.
Right. Like you can just audit a class, go sit in the back and attend.
Yeah, you could. And I will get into that, but she kind of likes to twist the truth a little bit in her favor. Let's say it like this.
Yeah.
It's very consistent with how she presented herself throughout her life, intellectually ambitious and kind of a cosmopolitan in a way.
Okay.
At some point during these years, Kadivez returned to Vienna again for medical treatment of what contemporary sources describe as quote-unquote nervous condition, so some mental health issue, I assume. And while she was undergoing treatment, she became acquainted with a Count Franz von Schlick, with whom she entered into relationship.
Oh, a real count?
Well, I honestly don't know. You know me, if someone in a story is described as a count, especially an Austrian count, I'm going to try to look them up, which should be easy, right? It's easy to look up noble families.
Yeah.
The name Schlick itself isn't a problem. There absolutely was the real noble family of the Schlicks in the Habsburg Empire with a very long and well-documented history. If there had been a Count Franz Schlick who fits his description, he should be absolutely traceable, but he isn't, at least not to me. The only Count Franz Schlick I could find was Franz Josef Heinrich Graf Schlick zu Bassano und Weißkirchen. Yes, that was his name and title. But the problem is he was born in 1748 and died in 1814, which means he was already dead nearly a century.
Yeah. Well.
Clearly not the man she was referring to.
He's not that count.
There's no clear record of a Count Franz von Schlick who matches Kadivez's account. No obvious candidate in genealogies, in the archives, whatever I could find online. Which absolutely does not mean that the man didn't exist, but it kind of strongly suggests that this was either not his real name or his real title, right? Again, this would be pretty much on brand for Edith Kadivec because in general she seemed to have had a habit of inventing stuff and reinventing herself. She, for example, altered the spelling and supposed origin of her name. She presented herself as a widowed baroness without being able to produce a marriage certificate. She claimed aristocratic and foreign parentage. That nothing holds up here. She had also earlier trouble involving falsified documents and manipulated registration records. So there was this kind of inclination of being not kind of too honest, let's say it like this.
Yeah. It's giving Joe Pesci and My Cousin Vinny. Like callow? Oh no, gallow with the G, not callow with the C. No, you misunderstood me.
Exactly, yeah.
Yikes.
So yeah, when she tells a story involving a mysterious count, I'm definitely taking it with a grain of arsenic, to be honest.
Yeah, you gotta.
It's entirely possible she had a relationship with a man who was wealthy influential, or simply felt aristocratic enough to be described that way, but the title certainly reflects her own self-mythologizing, and I wouldn't take it as verifiable fact. Anyway, let's stick with the name Schlick. That rhymes.
It does.
I like it. He was described by her later in her memoirs as having sadomasochistic inclinations. This is a detail that later sources, books, articles about her would fixate on heavily. Apparently, according to Edith's biography, and I'm not 100% sure if it was her first book, which was called Mein Schicksalbekenntnisse, which is kind of translate to My Fate, she wrote in 1926, or Eros, der Sinn meines Lebens, Eros, Meaning of My Life from 1932. So you kind of see where this is going.
There's a
right?
couple of autobiographies.
Yeah, and also kind of very heavily into the erotic literature.
As told by Anne Rice, as told by Anne Rampling.
Anyway, at some point she claimed that this relationship resulted in a pregnancy, and in 1910, Kadivez gave birth to a daughter also named Edith. Well, she named her, I think, Edith Françoise. So in 1910, she gave birth to that daughter in Brussels. The child was born out of wedlock, and after spending some time in Paris with her daughter, Kadivez then returned to Vienna in late 1915, so shortly after the outbreak of the First World War. Back in Vienna, she began presenting herself differently. She then started using variations of her name. She used, for example, a C, so Kadivez with a C instead of a Kadivez with a K. And then, as I said, she claimed aristocratic connections. She described herself as the widowed baroness. In her autobiography, she later insisted that her name, Kadivez, then spelled with a C, was the correct form, supposedly derived from Breton ancestry, so French ancestry. And she also started to pronounce it differently. And of course, again, there's no evidence to support any of these claims. Contemporary researchers generally agree that this was all an invention, and she was she was from Slovenia or Istria back at the time. What was real, however, was her education, her linguistic ability, and her demeanor. She was in general perceived as very cultivated, authoritative, socially dominant, and these were all traits that in post-war Vienna, they could be easily read as aristocratic, even if they're not. And that's again this, and I think we talked about it in several episodes already. If you behave a certain way, especially at the time, but still to this day, I think people will automatically assume you're better than.
That's right.
If you know how to present yourself, how to dress, how to talk,
it'll get you far and have the confidence.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It gives you definitely an upper hand in certain situations. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was much easier to reinvent yourself back then. Things like paperwork were easier to forge. And
yeah.
It was harder to look into things.
Especially after that kind of war.
Exactly. Yeah. It would, yes, it would be very easy to say, oh, I come from this place where, oh, look, all the records were lost in this whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Edith Kadivec reappears in Vienna during the war. And on 1st of February 1916, she opens a private school for modern languages, and she's now operating under the name Cadvé, which is C-A-D-V-A with an apostrophe. How do you say it? Apostrophe?
E with like an accent over the E. Yeah.
Yeah. Accent aigu, the one that goes up. The graph is the one that goes down. Yeah.
Got it.
One of the few things I remember.
I had no idea.
Yeah, because the graph is also heavy, so the heavy one pulls down in the end. That's how you can remember it.
Okay.
An Eselsbrücke, a donkey bridge. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
So this language school is located in the first district, so in the inner city at Bieberstraße 9. A large studio apartment, and she's able to rent it with the help of wealthy patrons. And I want you to keep this in mind because it will be kind of important for you to have this whole picture. Because honestly, somehow the timing couldn't really be worse. Vienna is deep in the First World War. Economy is bad. Food is scarce. Money is tight. The city is already feeling the strain. I don't think this is a great moment to launch a private educational venture. especially one, and this is the interesting thing, one that is aimed at working class students, which is weird, right?
Yeah.
This is a language school teaching French and other modern languages. And according to contemporary description, most of the students came from working class or lower income backgrounds, which already sets it apart from the more traditional private institutions of the time. I just want you to understand that this is at a time where working class children didn't have to learn French necessarily.
Right.
Thinking maybe if they wanted to go into domestic work, but still, no. That's, yeah.
It would be very unusual.
Yeah.
And it's just a stab in the dark, but I'm guessing we're not here because a really kind woman took it upon herself to teach underprivileged children foreign languages during a time of war.
When are our stories ever like that?
Yeah, no.
I think you all might have figured out by now this school isn't just about the children, because very quickly it becomes clear that adults are also attending, including wealthy and often well-known men from Viennese society, and at least one woman, I think, is in the record. Edith Kadivec advertises regularly in Viennese newspapers using a very specific phrase. She describes herself as a, quote, strenge Sprachlehrerin, end quote, which means a very strict language teacher. And that wording, of course, it's kind of a wink-wink, right? A code. Certain circles understood very well what it meant, which means people with masochistic interests in particular would have recognized immediately what a strict teacher means. In certain circles, let's say it like this, the school's reputation spreads not as a place to learn languages, but as a place where, find authority and discipline and punishment, and all of this plays a very central role. And it's all legally registered as a private school, and it advertises openly, and it operates in this super respectable address in the inner city. And as I said, she presents herself as this cultivated foreign aristocrat, the Baroness, with all these impeccable manners and the very commanding presence. And for years, this institution exists in plain sight. This finally brings us to December of 1923, just before Christmas. On 22nd of December 1923, a 12-year-old girl named Grete or Gretel Pilz runs away from the apartment where she is living in Vienna's inner city. She is a ward of her foster mother, Edith Kadivec, the very same woman who operates the private language school out of her large apartment on Bieberstrasse. The apartment is just behind Café Brückel. If you ever come to Vienna, you're gonna know exactly what I mean.
Oh, so the school, obviously, I guess it's still there. Well, the building where it was.
The building is still there. I assume it's still there. If it wasn't destroyed in World War II, I would have to look it up. I'm pretty sure it's still there. Grete, or Gretel, she was the daughter of a cleaning woman, and she lived under Kadivec's guardianship, officially being trained, as Kadivec would later claim, as a household helper. Running away was not new for her. Grete had fled before, I think 4 times. This time it was a little bit different because she stayed gone. 2 days later, so on Christmas Eve, the girl has been found. She's picked up in freezing temperatures, very far from the inner city, on the Wilhelminenberg. Just to give you an idea, the Wilhelminenberg is this hilly area on the western edge of Vienna, outside the inner city, so from Bieberstrasse 9, where Grete ran away from, to the Wilhelminenberg, it's roughly 7 to 8 kilometers, which is about 4.5 to 5 miles. That's not a short distance, especially not in winter, and I'd say certainly not for a 12-year-old child. She would have had to cross much of the city on foot, and she did that in freezing December weather.
Oh, was she just trying to get as far away as possible?
Yeah, I was thinking that, or then I was also thinking, did she try to get to some living relatives? Because I'm not 100% sure, but I think her mom was still alive. I think this was this kind of situation where an authority figure acted all benevolent and basically told the poor family, hey, you know what? I will absolutely take care of your kid, dress her, feed her, give her the best education, just hand her over to me.
And it must have felt like a godsend to the parents who were like, awful.
Yeah, because this was kind of a time, it still happens today, but less. But I think back then people were so easily blinded by the attitude.
That's
like
right.
This person could never be an evil person because she's so well-mannered and well-spoken
And it's a woman.
well-dressed. And it's a woman on top of that, exactly. Yeah. So Grete is found on Christmas Eve, and when she's brought in, an official medical examination is ordered. And the physician notes like kind of bruises, but there is blood drawn from like if you whip someone. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
It's not like a bruise where you punch someone and it's like when I whip someone.
Yeah.
And you have this kind of...
like hematomas.
There's also blood drawn. It's not... Yeah, hematoma, but also blood.
They broke the skin.
Like visible blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, they broke the skin. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And it's on her buttocks. And the injuries were not new, but they were serious enough that they were still visible several days after they must have been inflicted.
Oof.
And so now the girl is questioned, and what she tells the authorities is very specific. She says she's been regularly beaten by her teacher and foster mom, or warden basically, Edith Kadivec. And the most recent incident, she stated, took place 4 days before she fled, and the punishments were so severe, the girl said, that afterwards she could neither stand nor sit properly. She also explains that she no longer attended a public school. Instead, Kadivec taught her privately at home. Up to this point, this is not, let's say it's not out of the ordinary. In Austria in the early 1920s, corporal punishment of children was not categorically illegal. But it was already kind of regulated and increasingly contested. In schools, physical punishment by teachers had already been restricted before World War I. Officially, the teachers were expected to discipline students without excessive force. So that means beatings that caused injury or severe humiliation or lasting harm, they were not permitted, at least on paper. You know how it is or how it was.
Sure.
In practice, the enforcement varied and mild corporal punishment still occurred, but it was supposed to be exceptional and not like beating your students every day.
That's right.
It's like it was accepted and tolerated, but like as kind of a last resort situation. So which means in theory, a teacher could not just simply beat a child at will. Punishment that left the visible injuries, caused medical concern, or was repeated excessively could be prosecuted as assault, even if the adult claimed it was kind of an educational intent behind it.
Yeah.
By the 1920s, courts were already distinguishing between discipline and mistreatment. Outside of formal schools, so in private households, foster arrangements, guardianships, the situation was a bit more complicated though. Guardians and foster parents were still granted a degree of authority to discipline children in their care. Physical punishment was socially tolerated, but again, there were limits, severe repeated beatings, those resulting in injury, all that could, in theory, trigger criminal charges. I'm certain that if Grete had simply said that her teacher or her guardian had punished her by beating her behind, nobody would have cared, honestly. Even though she clearly had suffered some visible injury. But that is not everything Grete said, because there was so much more and it got so much worse. According to Grete, the beatings didn't happen randomly. They happened when men were present. In her statement, the child said that when male visitors came to the apartment, that she was given deliberately difficult learning tasks she was expected to fail, and the failure then served as justification for punishment. And before the punishments, she was always required to undress or at least expose her buttocks. And then she was made to lie across Kadivec's knee, and the teacher would then struck her with different tools, mostly a leather whip. And the girl said the punishments were always performed in front of an audience and only when visitors were present. Men who paid to watch. She also tells the police that Kadivec was paid 300,000 kronen for each of these performances. To put that number into context, at the time 300,000 kronen, roughly equaled the weekly wage of a female service worker, like a maid or a domestic servant. And if we try to translate it into today's money, it's a little bit tricky because the Austrian krone was already unstable. Inflation was kind of rampaging through the world or through Europe and the US. But if we consider purchasing power, we're talking about the equivalent, I'd say, of several hundred euros per incident.
Right.
Possibly even more.
Yeah. This isn't small change. There was a significant payment received for these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The police hears all that, and I think they quickly understand that this is not simply a case of a teacher using corporal punishment on a bad student, but that they're dealing with some form of organized abuse. Another detail emerges. Grete Pilz had previously been declared mentally deficient, which allowed her foster mother to keep her out of public school and claim that she required private instruction at home. And that declaration was made with the involvement of an eye doctor, a man named Bachstetz, who also appears under the name Stieglitz in the records. This explains how Grete could be kept isolated, educated at home, and removed from the oversight that a public school, for example, would have provided at least a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
She must have felt so unprotected. Like, what was she supposed to do?
Right. That's right. And she was a girl.
No place to go. And she was a girl. And from a working class, like completely disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that day, on that 24th of December 1923, Grete formally reports Edith Kadivec to the Vienna Juvenile Court for mistreatment. On January 3rd, a second official medical examination takes place, and the doctor again notes the bruises on the buttocks, and they're still clearly visible, and it's now at least 13 days after the injury was inflicted.
Oh boy.
The reports also state that the child was well nourished and well cared for, and that the injuries caused no lasting health impairments. So at least we have that.
I mean, not physically, I guess.
Yeah. Also on 3rd of January, investigators searched the premises of Edith Kadivec's so-called language school. And during this search, police find numerous instruments used for beating, the leather whips, rods, other tools. Among them, there's this leather whip with a silver handle, and it's engraved with the word dominatrix. Her tools were later, I think it was in the 90s, a little bit later, on exhibition in Graz, in an exhibition about masochism, as far as I remember, or sadomasochism. Yeah. But they find more. They also seize letters with sadomasochistic content. They find a personal diary, and the most important thing they find is a cash ledger. And that ledger turns out to be very decisive because it allows the investigators to reconstruct the payments and identify regular visitors. Basically, using the account book, police compile a client list. A list.
A list.
There's a list. And the names, would you believe it, are striking because they include well-known and socially respected men. Son of a former finance minister, a former state secretary, a large landowner, a popular Burgtheater actor, industrialists and their sons, university professors, so all pillars of the community. In other words, the respectable people, the ones with money, titles, university chairs, family names that open doors, the kind of people who are assumed to be morally sound simply because they look the part.
Oh.
They are so superior.
So superior.
people.
Our listeners know that it's just the idea that refinement equals virtue, right? We've talked about the sex chair at length. I don't think we need to get back into that again, but we all know better.
Yeah.
Good manners, a respectable job, and the right social circles somehow translate into better character.
Unfortunately, some people still think that's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should never forget, though, it's not that these people are better. Society just expects them to be better. And they are kind of blinded, as I said, and they refuse to look too closely when they're not. And I think this expectation and this not looking closely does a lot of damage to this day.
Yeah. It's almost as if this is such a current thing, isn't it? Honestly, the only thing I think American politics are unified on right now, literally the only thing is the very shared loathing and horror at the Epstein files, the list, and what's been going on with Ghislaine Maxwell and the files. And I think this is so interesting because Ghislaine Maxwell's the first time that I really gave much thought into what it does mean to have a woman as part of things, because there is another element of trust there, isn't it? And it's just making me think of that a lot. I'm sure I'm not the only person, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Nobody wants to hear about anything else.
Yeah. No, I was thinking of that as well. There are so many similarities, and because also I don't know if it was the same for you in the States. I don't think it was told to us children outright, but we were told not to trust strange men, right?
That's right.
But you always had this feeling you can trust a woman or a couple because there's a woman, she's probably a mother, or she will one day be a mother. She's not going to hurt you.
Agreed. And we've talked about this, I feel like, many times in the past where there have been true crime situations where a woman was part of it and led to that was part of how they got their victims. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does, I guess it still surprises us and kind of horrifies us in a different way than when it's a man.
Yeah, it's true. So they gather all this evidence. They have this list. At least they use the list. I mean, that's cool, right?
Yeah.
The evidence confirms what the girl Grete had already told police, and the investigators determined that yes, the punishments were performed in front of paying spectators. According to findings, these men that were present, they masturbated during the beatings. In some cases, sexual acts followed afterwards. And all of this had been described as discipline, but it's now clearly documented as staged violence carried out for payment. Police also question Edith Kadivec's own daughter. She's 13 at the time. And after intensive questioning, the girl admits that her mother bathed with her and did which there's nothing wrong with bathing with your children.
No.
In general. Well, not when they're 13 maybe, but you know what I mean. Yeah. But the problem there is that these situations where she bathed with her daughter involved sexualized contact, kisses in the genital area. The police reports also describe the apartment itself, that the walls are decorated with images showing an adult woman and a naked young girl in various poses with the child's genitals visible. According to the report, the girl was identified as Kadivec's own daughter.
Can you imagine? This is terrible. That poor girl.
On the very evening of the raid, and in the days that follow, several of the school's regular visitors are arrested and formally charged. Among them is a former baron, a foreign policy figure, the son of a powerful imperial minister, someone who had helped found the Vienna's University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences. Then we have a very famous, well-respected carpet dealer who was apparently living full-time at the Grand Hotel, which is one of the most luxury hotels in Vienna, especially at the time. And he liked to present himself as the school inspector when he visited the apartment of Kadivez. Also, of course, the eye doctor I mentioned before, the one who kind of did this declaration on Grete that she was mentally deficient or something. He was not only an eye doctor, he was also a university lecturer. That one is charged but not taken into custody because he was standing in for an absent department head at the clinic and he had very, very urgent surgeries to perform. So he was able to not be arrested because of that.
Oh.
You know, that kind of mattered. He was so important.
Wow.
Then we have a 27-year-old and the police, and I find that very interesting, they note that by profession, he's essentially only the son of a well-known industrialist. Like that's noted as his profession. Profession, son.
Yeah. Okay.
He's also the youngest. He's the youngest one, and he's also the one described in the records as having confessed without hesitation. Like he was like, yeah, it's true. I did that. I was there.
Wow.
I don't know if that was kind of like him owning up to it or him thinking he could never get in trouble for anything.
Right. Probably not guilt. It probably wasn't driven by...
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. It's more like probably smug. Like, so what?
Exactly.
What you gonna do now?
Right.
Yeah.
Like people with diplomatic immunity in the movies.
Yeah.
What are you going to do
like
about
this,
it?
Yeah. So there is a lot. The factory owners, civil servants, actors, opera singers. This all reaches deep into Vienna's respectable circles. You know what it also reminds me of? What was the name? Heidi...
Oh.
The one with the sex worker ring in LA back then with the client list.
The list. The lipstick madam, right? What was her name?
Yeah. Heidi something.
Heidi
Fleiss.
Heidi Fleiss,
yeah. Kind of reminds me of that.
It
right?
does.
So the investigation widens in January of 1924, and the police then identifies 3 additional children, boys and girls, who had been subjected to the same ritualized punishment by Kadivez. They also realized that Edith Kadivec had been accused of child abuse 2 years earlier. There was something where she severely punished, corporal punishment, a student she claimed for not studying the vocabulary well enough, and then on other times she claimed for masturbating. So that was, but boy. Nothing came of that. She was kind of reported for that, but that's it. Nothing kind of happened 2 years earlier.
Awful.
Kadivez's daughter and Grete Pilz immediately removed from the household, thank God, of course, and they are placed in the Louisenheim, which is an institution, or was an institution for children deemed at risk in their own homes. And through the testimony of all the children, this picture emerges of how the so-called lessons were carried out. They took place in the salon. Either visitors watched openly or they observed through a partially opened door. The child would be given an intentionally difficult task, one they were not able to solve or perform in any way. And then it was like, you need to be punished because you didn't know this or that or whatever. And then sometimes the child was even ordered to choose the tool of punishment. Like, would you like to have the beating with the whip or the pedal, something like this. And then I already told you, I think you can all picture it.
Yeah.
Basically, then afterwards, the children then had to apologize, kissing the hand of the teacher.
Yikes.
It's horrible to even think about.
It is, yeah.
Edith Kadivec is interrogated, of course, and then she signs a statement that will be quoted repeatedly in the press and at trial. What they keep quoting is that she describes herself as sadomasochistically inclined, and she says she feels, quote unquote, sexually not normal. Even before the charges are finalized, the case explodes in the media. The coverage ranged from absolute and total condemnation to arguments about sexual modernity and moral panic. Some outlets engage in total moral condemnation, presenting Edith Kadivec as this monster, proof that society has gone completely off the rails, which, she's a monster, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Problem is, others do almost the opposite, framing this case of part of this broader discussion about modern sexuality, and they are defending it as an expression of this sexual freedom.
Nope. No.
What we can see is how quickly, though, the coverage moves away from the actual crime and toward ideology. This is kind of a proxy war about morality. The populist voices, so right-wing, they do something very familiar. They locate the evil somewhere else, outside. According to their narrative, what happened couldn't possibly be Austrian in origin. It must have been imported. It's foreign. It's not from here.
Of course not.
It's corrupting the Austrian mind.
Yeah.
Even the police echo this framing in a way. In an official report, the acts were described as, quote, sadistic excess imported from the West, end quote. This is a moral infection. If you leave it unchecked, this will lead to lust murder and total social collapse. But it's not from here. Somebody brought it in from the outside.
Ah, from the West? What do they mean by the West?
When they say the West, they mean France, which is a long time, or was at the time, a long time enemy of Austria.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to me how every country has other countries that they mock or disdain or denigrate or fear, but they're all a little bit different, generally speaking, depending on where you go. But I'm kind of loving the fact that the people who are just a little too sexy for both Austria and the USA are the French, because I feel like I was like, oh, not the French. They're so sexy.
What I can think is also that maybe because of Marquis de Sade,
Oh,
that
yes,
was kind of,
yes.
it's coming from France.
That makes sense.
Right?
Yep.
Kadivez herself fits perfectly into this kind of narrative because she has lived in Paris, she was teaching French, she presented herself as foreign and aristocratic and changed her name to Cadvé, but she wasn't French. She had this association with France, and that was enough to make her a suspect, right, or suspicious.
Yep.
The media and at times the authorities themselves, they are trying to turn this deeply uncomfortable domestic crime into a story about the foreign influence and the moral contamination from outside. The trial starts end of February. These are some excerpts from an article from the Illustrierte Kronenzeitung from 28th of February 1924. It's titled, there's a picture, a drawing. She was not the only one on trial. All the other people who were charged with her were there. I sent you the drawing.
Yeah.
It's titled The Sadist Trial, Sadistenprozess, and you see a hand holding a whip.
Yes.
And then all the accused under it.
Yep.
So the article goes like this, quote, "The Child Whippers, a 3-day sensational trial behind closed doors, the Sadist Trial." The trial against the so-called child whippers began amid enormous public interest. From early morning on, crowds pressed against the gates of the Vienna Criminal Court. Guards and court officials struggled to control the influx. Despite multiple security checks, the large courtroom quickly filled. Actors, aristocrats, writers, senior civil servants, all hoping to witness what promised to be one of the most scandalous trials in recent memory. 2 mysterious suitcases were carried into the courtroom and placed on the judge's bench. A long, narrow case and a large leather trunk. Whatever they contained, it was obvious they would play a significant role in the proceedings. They were handled with almost tender care. The contents would soon be revealed. One by one, the defense attorney arrived, the most prominent lawyers Vienna had to offer, white-bearded veterans of the bar, presidents of the Lawyers' Association, celebrated courtroom orators. Their presence alone raised an obvious question. Who was paying for all this? The defendants all claimed to be without means. That is an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
The article continues. The defendants were charged with sexual abuse, incitement to indecency, and unnatural sexual acts. The accused were then formally identified. Edith Kadivec, 44 years old, appeared older than her age.
Ouch.
Yes, and, gets worse, undoubtedly was once very beautiful.
Oof.
How is it always, and I said it so many times, who cares how these women look?
I know.
She appeared in a black, elaborately embroidered reform dress, silk stockings, patent leather shoes, and carried herself as a lady of status. Side note from me, if you don't know, a reform dress were those loose-fitting clothes that were worn without a corset. That became popular in the 1920s. Her hair, once blonde, had already turned grey. Her face bore the marks of a life of strong passions. When questioned, she claimed to be widowed, though she had never previously mentioned this during her weeks in pre-trial detention. She stated she had married her partner in Paris but could not provide documentation. She admitted to having a 13-year-old daughter, end quote. And then the article follows with the other defendants, the wealthy young man, professionals, doctor, a woman associated with Kadivez, and so on. And the article describes all of them in detail and often with kind of a very thinly veiled mockery and disdain. Then the prosecution requested the exclusion of the public on grounds of public morality, although one defense attorney argued very passionately that the public had a right to hear the case, especially since the details were already circulating widely in the press. He argued that nothing discussed would exceed what was already known. So why would you kind of exclude the public?
Right.
The court disagreed with that. He said, no, this would cause a moral outrage and it's really not good for the public to hear all these things. So then the trial was ordered to be held behind closed doors, citing the danger that public reporting could corrupt youth and children, and only select quote-unquote trusted persons were allowed to remain, which were, I think, people who paid for it, because it was mostly aristocrats, artists, all members of high society.
Mm.
The article then continues, quote, "The contents of the mysterious suitcases were no secret. Police reports had already revealed them weeks earlier. They contained implements of torture used against children, whips of all kinds, riding crops, rods, leather straps with metal weights, birch switches, horse whips, and more. These were the tools used to punish children in Kadivez's salon in front of paying spectators for the sexual gratification. Among them, and that's where I found that, was the infamous dominatrix whip, a leather whip with a silver handle gifted to Kadivez by an admirer. Police had also found obscene photographs, catalogs, correspondence, and a household ledger listing payments and guests. The children were lured into these punishments under the guise of education. They were given impossible tasks, then beaten when they failed, failure being guaranteed. At least 3 children were identified as victims, 2 boys, aged 10 and 11, and a girl of about 13. The punishments were staged performances. Sometimes blood was drawn, sometimes not, depending on the client's preference. In some cases, guests kissed the children's wounds afterwards." End quote.
Ugh. This is awful.
It's horrible.
It's awful.
Yeah. When the trial begins, Edith Kadivec sticks to her central claim. As far as she's concerned, she did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. She tells the court that everything she did fell under the right to discipline children. The punishment, she says, were simply consequences for bad behavior, for badly learned vocabulary, and so on. As for the men who are now testifying against her, in her version, they're not witnesses at all. She claims they were paid by the father of her child and sent to frame her as part of some personal vendetta. The explanation doesn't get her very far. The jury, the judge don't believe anything. Over the course of questioning, Kadivec makes a statement that becomes central to the case because she admits that she only experienced sexual arousal when children are punished in her presence. She then tries to soften that admission by adding that she only reached orgasm afterwards, never while the children were still there.
Oh, that's okay then. That's fine.
Thank God the court is like, yeah, we really don't care. That doesn't make a difference here, lady.
No, that doesn't make anything. Like, how does that make things better? I also...
Well, if you have a twisted mind...
Well, which she obviously does. And you also wonder, just from that abnormal psych aspect of things, like what was done to her as a child, what were her experiences to kind of... How do we get there? How do you...
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's awful.
It's possible. It's not necessary,
No.
but it's absolutely possible that she also was a victim at some point. Definitely. Yeah. We don't know anything about that.
She
Yeah.
could just be a sadistic sociopath. It's
Could be. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. On 1st of March 1924, the verdict is delivered. Edith Kadivec is sentenced to 6 years in prison. 2 of the co-defendants receive minor suspended sentences. All the others are acquitted. Doesn't that sound familiar? Only the
yeah.
whatever. Her assistant teacher is also cleared, not because she didn't beat the children, but because the court can't prove that she did so for sexual gratification.
Right. Like beating the children isn't the problem. It was what they were.
Yeah.
It was because there was an ulterior motive
immoral.
attached to it.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Then Kadivec appeals, and then the sentence is reduced to 5 years. And then, in December 1927, she benefits from a Christmas amnesty. So on 18th of December 1927, she is released early.
Wow.
I think what is very clear is how ill-equipped the legal system was to deal with this case. She is charged with multiple counts of sexual abuse and corruption of minors, but also with indecency against nature. And maybe people think, oh, they must mean child abuse, but no, at the time, it didn't mean that at all. What the court was referring to was the homosexuality, specifically the relationship between Kadivez and her daughter, without going into detail there. Because, legally homosexual acts were punishable, regardless of gender, but in reality, prosecutions almost exclusively targeted men. Female homosexuality largely fell outside the imagination of the male legal experts, you know?
Right.
It was kind of, if a relationship didn't involve men, it's nothing to take serious.
That's right.
It's not real, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's also interesting how little attention or care is placed on the idea that women are also sexual abusers of children.
To this day.
Of course.
I think. Also, there are still many people who think female homosexuality is not a real thing.
Right.
Or bisexuality is not a real thing.
Which is wild to me.
It's like this stupid joke, like a lesbian, you never met the right guy or something like that. You know?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're like, just confused.
Well, maybe you're gay. Like, how many men have you slept with? How do you know you're not?
How do you know? Yeah.
How do you know? That shuts them up pretty fast, usually. I feel like we don't often see cases like this where women are sexually abusive to children, but we do see them. And I think, at least in the United States, where we most prevalently see them are situations where students are taken advantage of by teachers.
Yeah.
And there have been obviously some very famous ones over the years of that happening.
Yeah. Did you ever see that South Park did a really interesting episode about this kind of thing where, because it's a male student, everybody goes like, nice, cool, that's so cool.
Right.
You had sex with an older woman.
That's right.
But
no.
That's not it.
That's not okay.
No, this has to change.
Yeah, that's right. It's not okay either way. Like, people who are in a position of care and authority over children should never. I can't even, it's very hard for us to even wrap our brains around, right? Because we just can't, it's just such a not a thing. But this is just, it's so sad. So do we know what happened with these children?
Just a little bit. I found just a little info. We know that medical experts only diagnose psychological harm in one child, in a boy. He's described as depressed. It looks, maybe I'm interpreting things here or I'm biased, but it looks to me like for the girls, they mostly didn't really bother to check them, because Greta Bilz, for example, apparently complains of severe chronic abdominal pain, but no one seriously explores that there could be a psychological cause, for example. And Kadivez's daughter, she's described vaguely as sickly and fragile, but that's all we hear about her. The daughter's story is really sad, though, from the things I read. What's really infuriating is that in the eyes of the law, this 13-year-old girl is both victim and potential offender. She was seriously, actually at risk of being charged herself for the indecency against nature because of the bathing incidents with her mother.
Right. So they were almost going to charge her for being abused by her mother.
Yeah.
Wow.
Before she was arrested, she was attending a gymnasium, which is our high school, so higher education. But then she suffers a nervous breakdown, and she apparently, from what I could find, never resumed higher education at all. That's
awful. So the only person to actually go to jail is Edith. And also the system completely fails all the victims, right? And this is, I guess, what we mean when we say we just see the same things happening over and over and over again. I can't believe everyone was like acquitted or pardoned. That's wild to me.
Right? Just two who had this kind of...
I don't know why it's wild to me. It shouldn't
slap
be.
on the wrist.
Yeah. It's just... So do we know what happened to Edith after her release? Was she out there just menacing people forever?
We do know, at least up to a certain point. So while she was still incarcerated, she started writing. And she puts together this memoir that came out in 1926. As I said, the title was Mein Schicksal, so My Fate. And the book is explicit. Explicitly explicit. I didn't read it. I just read what people thought about it. And she writes about her childhood, her education in the Catholic institution, her sexual life, her work as an educator and language teacher, and she quotes very long passages from the court judgment, which is also kind of good in a way because large parts of the original material is now missing. So ironically, very ironically, her book preserves material that the State Archive no longer has on file. What she does not do is express remorse. She doesn't feel remorse at all.
That's interesting.
The book is later reissued in a more openly erotic version and kind of becomes a cult text in sadomasochistic circles, kind of like Marquis de Sade in a way, right? And I just want to be clear, the fact that this is read in some sadomasochistic circles does not mean sadomasochism automatically equals child abuse. It absolutely doesn't.
No.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Well, I think people listening to this podcast understand that there is a very clear delineation between whatever consenting adults want to do in their lives is one thing. But when you are engaging in anything like this with a child, it's abuse. There's no...
Of course, yeah. Even if the child will say yes, it's still abuse.
That's right. It doesn't matter what the child said. That's why we have, and I mean, it varies state by state. It varies country by country. We still have a lot of work to go. And I would argue most places around the world. But that's why having an age of consent is so important and having one that actually protects children until they are old enough to make decisions. Do you know what my niece and nephew, and I might have mentioned this already, were telling me last year, and I thought, how great. I hope the children of today are all this thoughtful. But they were saying how at their school, they were both in, one was in high school and one was in junior high. And they were saying that what they say now in school is, if the grades don't touch, you don't touch.
If the both don't touch?
If the grades don't touch, you don't touch.
Okay, I got it.
So if there's 4 years in high school and you're in your last year, don't touch anyone who's a first year. And I was like, wow, that's even more extreme than I would have thought. But I thought, the kids know what's up. The kids are starting to get it.
Yeah.
That's just smart. Yeah. If the grades don't touch, you don't touch. Because at that age, it does matter, doesn't it?
There's so much difference, yeah. Like later, when you're 34 years, 5 years is obviously nothing.
That's right. Yeah.
10 and 14?
Yep. Not okay.
For example. But that's a whole other discussion. That's
yeah. But we just want to be clear. We're not kink shaming anyone into sadomasochism. It's not our thing, but whatever you do, it's cool. And I think also people engaging in that don't want to be confused with anybody that wants to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So in 1931, the book is republished in Germany in a so-called private edition. And supposedly it's only for, libraries, scholars. It's very expensive, very limited, and technically kind of censored because the average person does officially not have any way to kind of get his hands on it or their hands on it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, then makes it only more desirable for people, right? So they kind of get their hands on it if they want to. Then, 1932, she publishes another book, a sequel, Eros, The Meaning of My Life. And this one focuses on the years after her release and kind of pushes even harder into her grand theory. Motherhood is a destiny, discipline is love, punishment is order. It's kind of her manifesto, I want to say. It's not really a memoir, it's her manifesto. And psychologists and sexologists of the time read it and they are apparently horrified. One describes her account of conception as something barely distinguishable from artificial insemination. I think she says something like heterosexual intercourse should only be practiced for
procreation.
Procreation.
Yeah.
and how disgusted she was clearly a homosexual woman because she's very disgusted, she says, with the penis and these kind of things.
Sure.
Motherhood is the ultimate goal for all the women and things like this. It's very...
She is a really interesting case of, I don't even know how to say it. Yeah, it's like all these problematic tropes encompassed in one very deeply disturbed person.
In 1927 already, she had officially changed her name to Edith Cristalli, I think, or Cristalli. I think probably because her name was so infamous, especially in Vienna at the time. And then she starts to file petitions, appeals, complaints, compensation claims, lawsuits against her daughter's court-appointed guardians. She files requests to reestablish contact with the child. I think she submits 10 applications to reopen her 1924 case. She casts herself as this loyal Austrian mother. She was wronged by corrupt officials. And then by 1936, 37, we see even more change in her kind of, what I want to call it.
Oh.
How do you call that? Her ideology, in her ideology. Yeah. Because now she claims, and we're heading into Third Reich territory here. Now she claims she's the victim of a Jewish world conspiracy. And then it starts echoing, all her petitions from then on starts echoing the Nazi rhetoric.
Yeah.
Which could be that is really also that her ideology evolved into this kind of direction, or that she knew if she wanted to get something done, she needs to echo this ideology.
It's not a surprise. Right? It's not a surprise move.
Yeah. What's interesting, at that point, court is just like over her. They don't even engage with anything anymore. Yeah. Her filings are dismissed. Yeah.
Lawsuits. So I'm the victim. Blame everyone else. File as many lawsuits as I can.
Yeah.
Wow.
In 1940, then, she's declared partially incapacitated by court orders. I think she got really lucky there that she wasn't that she didn't disappear in some institution.
Agreed.
We know what, yeah.
She should have been in one the whole time.
After the war, she keeps going, again, with all the paperwork. In 1949, she files her 10th request for a retrial. She just doesn't stop. She doesn't give up. And again, it's denied. And again, the court reaffirms that she's not legally competent. And then in the early 1950s, she's largely forgotten. She spends time in a psychiatric hospital at Steinhof in Vienna. That's the same institution that had super quietly continued much of its staff from the Nazi period. There is a whole other case I'm working on for 2026 involving the Steinhof during the Third Reich.
Yeah.
And then her final known act, an application for compensation for her imprisonment, she filed that in 1953. And by that time, she's in her 70s. Again, it goes nowhere. And after that, she simply disappears from records. We don't really know what happened to her after that.
Wow.
That's a whole lot, right?
It's a lot.
There's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's terrible, and it's familiar, and it's terribly familiar.
Yeah. I have one last kind of fun fact for you. I think it's a fun fact. I love the Viennese dialect. I love it. It's very dear to my heart. It's an incredibly colorful dialect. It's very expressive. It's very sarcastic, lots of dark humor. It's very affectionate. It's very painting pictures with words. And it's very ruthless, especially when it comes to naming things. And Edith Kadivec managed to earn herself some kind of verbal immortality, because after her trial, the name slipped into everyday Viennese language, and Kadivezeln became a colloquial Viennese verb, and it means something like to beat, to whip, to give someone a whipping is Kadivezeln.
Wow. That is savage.
Mm-hmm. That's very Viennese. That's very
I really can't wait to visit Viennese. You. This has been such an awful, infuriating, so upsetting, this case, these children.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable to listen to, and it's uncomfortable to talk about, and it's uncomfortable to think about, and it's supposed to be uncomfortable because it shouldn't happen. It's I wish I could say, wow, like we sometimes do, boy, aren't we lucky that things have changed so much and this is just not a problem anymore or so rare. But I think we all know this is as bad as it's ever been, if not worse, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to spread awareness, and it's important to listen to victims and listen to what they're saying. I really hope all those people, all the children that were injured by her, because it was more than those 3.
Definitely. I'm also thinking, was this really her daughter, or we just don't know? Could it have been a kid she took in Paris?
That's right.
From a working class family and tell them, I'm going to take care of your child. We don't know.
We don't. No, especially because she targeted people that would have a hard time fighting back.
Yeah. Also people that would trust her. Or you're this teacher.
That's
you're going
right.
to train my child.
Yeah.
And it's just, and as you said, there is this kind of, on the one hand, you don't want to talk about these things, but we have to talk about these things. And obviously, I tried not to be kind of salacious about things, but also if we don't talk about these things and keep them hush-hush,
right.
That's when you think, oh, something like this never happens. You don't have to worry. Like it was in the, 70s, 80s, oh, child abduction by strangers, it's not a thing.
Right.
Yeah, because people didn't know how often it could happen.
That's right. And I think also when you don't know any of the specifics, like obviously because of what's going on in the news with the Epstein files, and I think that affects people in countries all over the world. So I imagine that's something most of our listeners are familiar with. So that's a really easy, topical, current example. But it's so easy to think of these girls who were there on this island in this very vague way because we don't talk about what really happened or you know what I mean?
Oh, they gave massage as well. What's the big deal about this kind of thing?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's just awful. Thank you so much. Thank you for that awful, awful story, Johanna. That was hard to research, I bet. But I had no idea that ever happened. I had no idea at all about this case.
Also, we kind of, well, not you and me because we know better, but many people have this kind of rose-tinted glasses when looking at the past and are like, oh, yes, people were poor, yes, children worked in mines, but people were more moral back then.
No, of course
there was
not.
no kind of child abuse ring torturing children in front of paying customers. But no, it happened. It did.
Of course. It's amazing to me, we've been doing this for such a long time now, I feel like. And I am never, I don't know what the right word to say this is. Like, it never ceases to amaze me how terrible people can be to each other.
And have always been. Yeah.
And we will never run out of content because there is always, as you say, somebody horrible doing something terrible somewhere. I think for both of us, it's, I guess the only upside, the only something good is that today, victims of this kind of abuse and trafficking have resources that they couldn't dream of 100 years ago. And they also have people like us and lots of other podcasts and storytellers out there that share these stories so they aren't forgotten. If you're in the United States, you can go to humantraffickinghotline.org. You can call 911. You can call 1-888-373-7888, which is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you go to their website, you can submit tips, you can chat, and you can also send emails to help@humantraffickinghotline.org. And I'm sure wherever you are, there are similar resources. Yeah.
All right. I think that's it, right?
I think that's it. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, you could really help us out by leaving a rating or a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help more people find the show, and we are so appreciative. I've got a review from 3 years ago. This is from Lauren Order, who gave us 5 stars and said, "Love it. Listening in Worcester, Mass. Great show, always looking for something for my mom and I to listen to when we drive her on her errands. She's in her 70s. We have a great time with you ladies. Love it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, Mom. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you want to support Fresh Hell directly, you can join us on Patreon. That's where you'll find bonus content, ad-free early access, Cinema Macabre, and all the other strange little side path we tend to wander down and never come back.
That's right.
And we are lost. We're gone.
We're gone forever.
Down the rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole. You can also find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram. You will find all of the links on our webpage, freshhellpodcast.com, and that is where you'll find our email and P.O. box as well.
And that's it. Please tell your pets we said hi, hug them, cuddle them, treat them kindly, treat your fellow humans kindly, at least from time to time, and also be kind to yourself.
That's right. And if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.